All right. Well, welcome everyone to HBAP Startups. I'm here with my partner in crime, Susan Shultz. I wouldn't be here without her, and I want to be just like her when I grow up. Thank you, Susan.
That's scary.
Yeah, right. No. For me, this is, yeah. For those of you who are new to our startups group, we have a few announcements that we do at the beginning of each meeting. We do some short, brief networking breakout rooms, and then we come back together for our main event. And first off is our mission. We're here to help foster an innovation and entrepreneur community coming out of the Harvard Business Analytics program. Our goal is to provide our members with the tools, knowledge, leadership, and confidence necessary to create and grow their businesses from the ground up. For those of you who are HBAP students, we have an internal website, community calendar, and a Slack channel. For those of you who are not HBAP students, you can become HBAP students. Go to analytics.hbs.edu, click the apply button. And I'm 95% confident that there's a small probability that you'll actually get in. And by the way, that was a truly brilliant statistics joke. And if you didn't get it, please click apply now, and then we'll explain it to you. Newsletter, here's a link to our newsletter. I'm going to invite everyone to sign up for that. Let me put this into the Zoom chat. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, please sign up for the newsletter so that we can newsletter you. Susan, this is for you.
Nice use of a verb as a verb and a noun. Yeah, very nice.
I'm working on it.
All right. So our code of conduct, in the spirit of our mission, our objective and our job and our goal is to really have this space be a time when you can come and learn things and listen and talk about the things that are going on for you. And in the spirit of collaboration, because we have a lot of really incredible people on here, people that are just starting startups, people who have successful startups, all of that. Unless the speaker says otherwise, all rights are reserved by the presenter. And of course, we're staying always in alignment with the HBAP honor code and with Francis Fry's feedback approach, which is for every one piece of advice or feedback that might be a little tart, we give 5 pieces of feedback or advice that are uplifting and optimistic and positive. And then if anybody's worried about a conflict of interest or anything like that, just give Todd and or me an email and we'll talk to you about it and we'll figure out what's going on.
All right. Thanks, Susan. I like to do a little welcome to any new folks. So if you are new to our group, please raise your hand and I will call on you. 10 seconds. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? How did you hear about us? And what's your superpower? And I see, I'm going to cold call on Annie because that's a face I don't recognize. So Annie, I'm cold calling on you. Can you unmute and tell us who you are? Annie Huang Yen.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. I didn't recognize my name. So my name is Anne Wang Ying.
Sorry, Anne.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's perfect. I'm from Montreal in Quebec, Canada. I'm a director of analytics and innovation. And I heard about you because there's so much strength and communication in the HBAP community. So today I decided to join. And I guess my superpower is I have kids and I don't get tired because of them. So I guess that's a superpower. Thank you, Todd.
I love it. All right, who else? Anyone else? I think we've got everyone else's a familiar face. All right, so I'm going to move on. If I missed you, I apologize. We'll come back to you later. Upcoming announcements tonight is Daniel Epstein. Next week, Susan and Jeremy, our very own Susan and Jeremy, will be giving us a product market fit workshop. June 1st is the monthly social, so startups will not be meeting on June 1st. June 8th is Golden Martinez from getfocus.org. And on June 15th, Mark Pillar, the CEO of Backendless, is going to be coming to present his company and his journey. And for those of you who like to build things and work in no code, low code, you're not going to want to miss the Backendless presentation. All right, so now what we like to do is I'm going to recreate some breakout rooms. And this is all randomly selected. And I don't know why this is not working. Hold on, recreate, reduce a bunch of breakout rooms, 5 minutes. And I will see you guys on the other side. And the prompt, by the way, is who are you? What are you looking to do? And how can I help you? All right, I'll see you in a few. All right, everyone should be coming back into the main room. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had an enjoyable breakout room. Susan, pitch competition. I cannot hear you.
Yes, I understand. I was muted. So just a reminder that those of you that are entering the pitch competition, the deadline is 9 a.m. Eastern time zone to submit your PDF of your pitch deck and a 3-minute video, no longer than 3 minutes. And for those of you, and I'm going to paraphrase wildly, for those of you that were not able to make the pitch competition question and answer period today, I was not either, but Satya was there and he told me a couple of really exciting things. The main one is you don't have to use that format that they gave as the example format for your pitch deck. If you don't want to, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. And the other exciting thing was they actually showed, and I'm calling out Allison Byers because she's on here, they showed the Scroobius template format. You know, you start with your mission and you go through the steps. And we did that on our last call where she talked to us about that. Super exciting. So my own personal thing is join Scroobius. They have 3 different levels of pricing and it's awesome. And you get to see all these resources and they'll help you with your pitch and all this cool stuff. But if nothing else, look at that pitch template that they showed in the question and answer session today, because it's a very nice template. Did they
post that, Susan? I missed the session today.
Yeah, they're going to record it, or they did record it. I don't know if they posted it. Yeah, Kelly.
This morning they did not they did not record it.
Oops.
Oh, they did not.
They did not record it. Mm-hmm. But they will. I think they will post the sample of the pitch deck.
Okay.
And right. I don't think I'll have time, but just in case, is it going to be easy to find the email of where we send it off to?
Yeah, I'll put it. Yes, I'll put it. I'll put it in the. I have this. This is where you need to
Todd.
submit. I'm putting it in the Zoom chat. I've got it all ready to go.
Dream
all right. So we'll come back to the pitch competition later during overtime. Go ahead, Susan.
No, I was going to say. So let's go on to the most exciting piece of today.
So again, reminder at the end, after we're done, we'll stop recording. Please stick around, hang out for some overtime. We'll also have a poll at the end. And now onto our main event. First, a special thanks to Kelly Kimball for inviting our next guest. Kelly, thank you for everything. Now, it's my great honor to introduce Daniel Epstein. It's Daniel's unfettered belief in entrepreneurs that led him to found and become the CEO of Unreasonable Group. Unreasonable is an organization that's dedicated to supporting an international fellowship for growth stage entrepreneurs who are profitably solving global issues. Today, Unreasonable actively supports over 310 growth stage CEOs, channels exclusive deal flow to hundreds of investors and investment funds, and partners with multinational brands and institutions to discover profit in solving global challenges. Recently, Daniel was named by Fortune magazine as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, alongside the likes of Bill Gates and Tim Cook, and 48 other people that you've probably never heard of. Daniel was also awarded Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30 entrepreneurs, and Forbes identified him as one of the top 30 most impactful entrepreneurs. At the Global Entrepreneurship Forum, he also received the prestigious Entrepreneur of the World Award, along with the president of Liberia and Richard Branson. beyond the day-to-day boring stuff that he does at Unreasonable, Daniel is a frequent keynote speaker, moderator, thought leader, and advisor. Now hold on. I gotta show this to everyone. I hope you can see the slide. Fortune World's 50 Greatest Leaders, World Entrepreneurship Forum Entrepreneur of the World Award, Forbes Top 30 Impact Entrepreneurs, Inc. Mag Top 30 Under 30, Diplomatic Courier Top 99 Under 33, the White House Impact Award Top 100 Entrepreneurs in the United States. Like, I tied my shoes this morning. Okay, actually, that's completely not true. I lied. I have slip-on Skechers shoes. There are no shoelaces. So now, without further ado, I invite everyone here to please briefly unmute yourselves, and let's give a warm round of applause to Daniel Epstein. Thank you, Daniel. It is an honor to have you here tonight.
This is really great.
All right, Daniel, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. That was way too generous of an introduction. I was looking around the room, eager to listen to this person speak, whoever this person may be, because I definitely do not deserve those awards or points of recognition. I think it is maybe representative of the quality of the community that we have at Unreasonable, though. And Kelly is, of course, a cornerstone mentor in that community and a good friend. And so Todd and Susan and Kelly, thank you all for helping make this happen. And for everybody who's tuning in, time is our most expensive asset. You all are remarkably busy. And so it actually means a lot to me. And I'm humbled that you're tuning in. And nobody wants more time on Zoom necessarily. So I really appreciate it. And hopefully my dog doesn't bark too much and no chaos happens, but I am at home. So, a fair warning on that side. Actually, my last call, someone's cat jumped on their keyboard and then put the cat's butt right in the camera. And it was kind of an amazing moment. So if that happens, that's okay. With that said, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was going to speak a little bit, share some slides and kind of walk through why we do what we do at Unreasonable, and then just open it up for conversation. Does that sound right?
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's test out technology because it's still tough sometimes. Did that come through? Can everybody see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So as was mentioned, I founded and I am the CEO of an organization called Unreasonable. And I find that I oftentimes do need to start here, which is to do you all the courtesy of explaining why Unreasonable. This individual on this slide, very famous person within our organization and community. This is George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, who wrote a bunch of beautiful things. But one of them that really resonated with me while I was in university is his quote around being reasonable. He said that the reasonable person adapts themselves to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress is dependent on the unreasonable person. If George Bernard Shaw is right, if all progress depends on unreasonable people, then it's our belief within our community that we cannot afford not to bet on the world's most unreasonable individuals, which we happily believe are entrepreneurs. All of you who are working on startups or identify as entrepreneurs, you likely have a very curiously warped perspective compared to most of your friends. Where most of the world sees market failures, you tend to see opportunities, but entrepreneurs also, I think, have the courage to bring those ideas into existence, no matter how hard it may be. And so for me, my startup journey did start pretty young. I really got involved in launching startups in university. And at that time, I remember thinking that, or actually writing, I said, all entrepreneurs in my journal, all entrepreneurs design solutions to problem sets. And I wrote on the next line, well, I can choose the nature of the problem sets I want to solve. And I wrote on the third line, therefore, I'm only going to work on problem sets worthy of my life's work. I knew what we all know. The statistics around startups are really awful. 5 years after formation, 90% of startups don't exist. That's still the statistic in the United States, which is pretty wild. And while I was trying to figure out, okay, if it's going to be hard and I'm going to leverage my time, sleep, equity, relationships into starting something, I figured, well, it might as well go after trying to solve some of the world's toughest problems. That's when I was in university, I learned about the United Nations, which now I know more about. But the first time I really learned about it was my freshman year in university. And when I was talking to friends and other people about solving these really, or trying to play a role in putting a dent on these global issues, I learned about the Millennial Development Goals. So not the Sustainable Development Goals, but the Millennial Development Goals. And this happened and came together in the year 2000. 189 nations came together at the United Nations, and it was the largest international treaty that was ever signed by heads of state. They came together in the year 2000 and said by 2015, we're going to set and hopefully achieve 8 very important global goals. The number one goal on that list of the 8 was to half the number of people living in extreme poverty, less than $2.50 a day. When I looked into this, I realized the United Nations really actually had trillions of dollars of influence at their disposal. 189 nations ratified it. They had the global infrastructure to pull it off. Bono was in support of the Millennial Development Goals. And then the question was, of course, well, what's happening? Where did we end up? And if we zoom in on the region of the world that has the highest percentage of individuals living in absolute poverty, that's sub-Saharan Africa, you can see the changes into exactly the trend line that we had all hoped for. In 1990, 44.6% of the population was living in poverty. In 2010, 20 years later, it was 44%. What's really scary about this number, and what scared me and my friends at university, is because of population growth. That means that there were 140 million more individuals in sub-Saharan Africa living in poverty in 2010 than there were in 1990, right? And meanwhile, this goal is supposed to be hit by 2015. It reminds me of a quote that I really love, where Einstein had a, I think, fantastic definition of insanity. His definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And this type of thinking is really what led a lot to the genesis of Unreasonable, and towards the diehard belief in entrepreneurs who tend to look at things quite differently than the rest of the world. I love this word, entrepreneurs. Its roots are French, which means it's really hard to spell for me. I've written it thousands of times, and I do not know where the E's and the U's properly belong. But interpreted, if you look at its roots, it can be interpreted to mean to take into one's own hands. I think this is why we believe so desperately in entrepreneurs. In today's world, there is no shortage of great ideas. Many people have them all the time. I'd also argue that there isn't necessarily a shortage of capital. In some ways, there's more investment than there is kind of sense in the world. But I would say that there is a dearth of courage, that it takes a very specific type of person to try to solve a problem that deeply matters to their community, to the region, to the world, to society, and to make that their life's work, and to try to do something that nobody else has ever done and put everything on the line. And that is really what we do at Unreasonable, is we support those courageous entrepreneurs who are trying to solve the seemingly intractable problems of our time. Today, the community of CEOs that we support, it's getting larger. We're adding about 50 a year. We have 313 CEOs in what we refer to as the fellowship. Once they're in the fellowship, we support them for life. We support them holistically. That could be, connections to relationship counselors. If an entrepreneur feels like maybe she's not showing up in the same way that she wants for her family, as her company, that's expertise on cross-continental supply chain, product development, branding, board placement, financing, whatever. Across these companies, the real businesses, they've generated about $8 billion in revenue. They've raised about $9 billion in equity financing. Much more important to us is the reality that they are measurably impacting 1.4 million, just over 1.4 million lives in a meaningful way. And I'll go into some examples here to make that real. Another thing that's exciting about entrepreneurs is they really are job creators. And the Kauffman Foundation put out a report a couple of years ago that said nearly all net new job creation is created by entrepreneurs, by small businesses that are rapidly growing. And that we're starting to see a trend where large multinationals are starting to slowly shrink. And so that entrepreneurial spirit is becoming ever more important. That's evidence these 300 startups, in essence, are supporting just shy of 1 million jobs now around the world. So I'm going to try to make it real by storytelling a little bit about some of the companies that we support, and then what we actually do with them, and then we could just have a conversation. I will also say everything here is unreserved. You can use any of this material however you want. I know there was a disclaimer. Everything here, nothing's proprietary by any means. So this is Jennifer Holgram, one of the entrepreneurs in the Unreasonable Fellowship, an amazing individual. She had actually retired. And she moved out to Colorado. That's where I'm based. I'm calling in from Boulder. And she was living up in the mountains with her husband in a very remote actually area. And then she got a call that she said she couldn't turn her back on. And the call was from a scientist in New Zealand who had a theory, in essence, that they could develop a technology where you could ensure that this image never happens again. That emissions don't go up into the atmosphere, and that instead they're turned into profit. When we first started working with Jennifer and her company, it's called LanzaTech. This was the pilot plant that they had in operations. This was in Guangzhou in China. And this is a steel refinery or steel mill. Here you can see the smokestack. Normally, in this case, it was carbon monoxide would have been piped up into the atmosphere. And instead, it's liquefied and it's put down into this tank down here. And in essence, the company LanzaTech has bioengineered bacteria to be able to ferment pollution and turn it into ethanol. Ethanol can then be converted into jet fuel, as well as polyethylene plastic or fabric. So over the years, we started working with Jennifer in 2016. In 2019, this was the size of their facility. Her goal was always to be able to fly airliners on recycled carbon or recycled pollution. They're able to string a partnership together with Boeing and Virgin Atlantic. And this was a couple of years ago. Virgin Atlantic flew their first airliner across the Atlantic, powered exclusively on recycled carbon. So capturing that pollution turned into jet fuel. They're now doing that with a number of airlines. They've also actually partnered with another one of the companies in the Unreasonable Fellowship, and we were able to help connect them to some grant funding actually to forge a partnership. And they are now making clothing, sneakers, yoga pants, you name it, out of methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. It's an incredible technology. A great example of, we look for entrepreneurs who potentially, yes, they can create multi-billion-dollar companies. LanzaTech's now worth about $2.5 billion. Much more importantly, they could win a Nobel Prize because of the impact that they're trying to have in the world. Another great example of somebody who hits that intersection, this is Uma Valetti. He's born and raised in India, very smart. And in India, when you're applying to get in medical school, there's a national exam, and every individual gets ranked on that national exam who takes it that year. Uma is a bit of a genius in that sense. He was the #1 ranked student in India for going into medical school out of however many must have applied. And Uma, though, has been a vegan since he was a kid. And the reason he was a vegan was in his ninth birthday, in front of their house, they were eating goat, and he walked to the back and they were slaughtering the goat. And he realized that he couldn't partake in that. So when he zoomed out and he got older and he looked at the challenge of meat production, he learned, and this is a pretty shocking statistic, that humans raise and kill over 70 billion animals a year for human consumption. And when you look at the effects on climate change, it's pretty miraculous, let alone the animal side of things. In terms of how we raise meat, there are actually really great ways to raise meat, but not at the scale that we need. And so we've gone to factory farming. So Uma knew this problem. Meanwhile, he's at the Mayo Clinic. He's doing open heart surgery. He's a young doctor there, and he's doing stem cell transplant to regrow heart tissue. And he realizes, well, hang on, if we can use stem cells to grow heart tissue, why can't I use stem cells to grow steak instead of having to raise and kill an animal? That led to this company called Memphis Meats. I should have updated this because they've rebranded to now Upside Foods. They are able to make beef. That was their first meatball. It looks much better now. They make chicken. They make fish, salmon. This is real meat made out of stem cells. So this is 99.99% more efficient in terms of water consumption. It's 99.9999% more efficient in terms of land use for meat production. It's incredibly nutritious meat, and you don't have to raise or kill an animal to do it. They have partnered with Tyson and Cargill, the two largest meat companies in this half of the world, this side of the world. And they'll be on shelves at the end of this year, which is a pretty exciting proposition. I am also vegan, so it's actually like a dilemma. Do I eat it or not? But we'll see. Either way, an incredible business. I have an incredible change. I'll just give you one more example of one of the entrepreneurs. This is Susan. Her company is called Dendra. And her and her co-founder, they were NASA scientists, and they had the project from NASA to figure out how to terraform Mars. So bring terrestrial life, plants in essence, to the Martian landscape. And so they'd go to these really remote areas in around the world, really tough environments that had really experienced desertification in a big way, try to figure out how to bring life back. What they realized instead is that instead of terraforming Mars, we actually desperately need to re-terraform our planet. The rate of deforestation is shocking. It depends on who you talk to, but we do need to plant quite literally trillions of trees. And you talk about carbon sequestration, and there's really advanced technology we're really excited about, but a tree also does it. The soil also does it. And so that became their project. They launched Dendra Systems. This was the first prototype. It's an autonomous drone. It's actually a series of drones that communicate to each other. But this one, is now actually much larger than in this image, and it shoots tree pods into the ground. So it flies autonomously over the ground, and then it's able to plant trees. One operator can plant 100,000 trees in a day. They are also analyzing the topography in the soil. They're planting different species that will ensure that it's not a monocrop in terms of the reforestation project. And they're very active right now across Southeast Asia. And they have planted tens of millions of trees, but they want to be planting billions soon. They had partnered with Parrot and others, just some of the larger drone companies out of the world. And I'm mentioning these large companies because our theory of change is not just to help radically scale up these really innovative startups. It's also to influence multinationals and governments to transition their operations towards sustainability faster by way of getting connected to these technologies. Fast examples. We also work with the largest indoor hydroponic farm in the world. It's 400 times more efficient than traditional agriculture. No sunlight, no soil. What would take 400 acres, they can produce in an acre. It's a great, fun example. It's a fun car to drive. This is River Simple. It's a hydrogen cell powered vehicle. There's a lot of talk about electric. That's really important, but it's never one solution that will solve the problem. And so this car gets 300 miles to a liter of hydrogen. The only thing that comes out of the exhaust pipe is purified drinking, literally drinking water. You could drink it. It is purified. Speaking of drinking water, this company, Zero Mass Water, they have a product called Source. This is a steady state solar panel. It's not plugged into anything, and it can produce 15 liters of drinking water, clean drinking water a day in the middle of a desert. So they've deployed these around the world and providing clean drinking water to a couple million folks. So the theme here, as an example of the just over 300 companies that we support, and the theme for us is our focus is on trying to scour the globe and find the most effective entrepreneurial technological solutions that we can find in the world that are already having a compelling impact on a pressing global challenge. And then we try to do everything to give them a collaborative advantage. So you might be bringing clean drinking water to 2 million people. Our question then is, great, this works. How do we scale what works? How do we take it to 200 million people faster? And in essence, that's why the community exists. I don't know why this slide is doing that. The average company, when we actually bring them into the fellowship, they've raised about $30 million US in financing, and generated close to that in revenue. And so they have some movement, some traction, but we're trying to take them to intercontinental scale faster. This is a snapshot just of some of the companies that we're supporting the Unreasonable Fellowship. It is really global. What we have learned is that genius comes out of every single geography, and that entrepreneurs are like weeds busting through concrete. They're not limited to Silicon Valley or Boston or Boulder, everywhere. When we talk about solving really pressing challenges, what we've really seen is that it's the entrepreneurs who have the empathy for the challenge that are oftentimes most successful as well. And so a lot of them are in market, but they're headquartered in over 50 countries, operating in nearly every country and territory in the world. So how do we do what we do? It's all about community. When people ask me, what do we do at Unreasonable? It's kind of a hard question to answer. But what I would say is we build community. In particular, we build community between entrepreneurs, investors, and institutions to, as Todd mentioned, to collaboratively, profitably solve global challenges. That community is made up of a number of different branches. One of them, of course, is the entrepreneurs. They support each other. But they also have a group of mentors, and Kelly's one of them. We have about 1,000 mentors around the world. This is just a quick snapshot. But these mentors bring in their expertise. They bring in the stories of their failures. They bring in their networks, and they do so voluntarily, because most people who have been really successful in business, as we all know, were lucky enough typically to have a great mentor along the way. And so there's a desire to pay it forward. And I think our community of mentors feels that if they're going to mentor any entrepreneurs, why not mentor those who are trying to solve these really hard, meaningful problems? So we are blessed to have such an incredible community and diverse community of individuals. Now, we also work with multinationals, and we do work with some governments as well. And we are working with them to align them with relational access, and I'd say trusted access to the entrepreneurs that we support. Because it's hard to find a company now that hasn't made a statement about what they want to do differently, that they maybe want to be carbon neutral by 2035, or whatever that statement might be. They've all put it out there. I think businesses understand why it's important now to take a stance on issues of inequity or the environmental crisis, whatever that might be. But oftentimes the question is no longer why it's important, it's how do we actually do it? And our belief is that the entrepreneurs we're lucky to support, and entrepreneurs everywhere, are kind of beacons of the future, and they're experiments in how a business can sustain itself and solve a pressing challenge. And there's a lot of our business models in here, which we can go into later, but working with these multinationals and governments. I will say I'm really excited about a new initiative that we have launched called the Unreasonable Collective. This is actually a teammate of mine who's far smarter than I am, and that's not me being humble. She is. Her name's Pratibha. She's a managing director with us, and she came out of investment banking. And so when she joined our team at Unreasonable, we work with about 1,000 sources of capital. And so these are private equity, venture capital, sovereign wealth funds, foundations, governments. And we constantly connect our entrepreneurs into, or try to connect our entrepreneurs into all of these different funders. And Pratibha called me one day and said, "Hey, I am passing the most compelling investment opportunities I've ever seen to Blackstone and BlackRock and Sequoia and others." And she said, "Why can't people like me invest?" And Pratibha is an angel investor as an individual. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I'm an immigrant woman. I'm a mom, a working mom, and I'm not a billionaire. So I don't have access to these types of opportunities. Can we play a role in changing that, in changing the demographics of access to financing?" That became the collective. So it's a membership-based community. There's about 200 members now who are individuals who really want to invest in creating a future that's aligned with their values. And so exciting opportunity for us to really step into this investment world much more seriously, and to be able to support the companies. We look at least 50% of the companies we support are led by diverse teams, and at least half of our mentors are as well. Those are our minimum thresholds, but we're far above that, because we also want to change the demographics of who gets funded. In the United States, less than 2.5% of funding went to women last year, women CEOs. If you look at Black women, it's less than 1%. And we have an active role, I think, in playing a part to change that. So this is maybe the abstract, and then I will stop talking here. But I think most of the world, at least used to, really think that things were bifurcated, right? You had doing good and doing well on opposite ends of the spectrum. Doing good, having a positive impact on the planet or society, doing well financially, making ends meet, in essence. And I think we would all agree that it's not this simple, that it's not that you have the nonprofit and the for-profit world, the public and private sector, and it's so black and white, and that actually we can be a little more nuanced about this and say that this is at least two-dimensional on an X and Y axis. So on this graph, as we go to the right on the X axis, this means you're doing more good for people or the planet. And if you go up on the Y-axis, that means you're making a stronger financial return. So if we pretend what these blue dots might be, I'm not going to name names, but this could be a certain politician. This may be let's drop down here. This may be like over here. Maybe this is like a bank robber of sorts. Down here, maybe we have a Red Cross volunteer doing a lot of good in the world, but volunteering their time. This may be a elementary school inner city teacher horribly underpaid for the amount of impact that they have on society. They may be down here. And this dot here tends to be where most of the world thinks that impactful businesses live and operate, social entrepreneurship, that you can do well by doing good. And what we're trying to prove at Unreasonable is that actually this is the future we're walking into. And it's not that you can do well by doing good, it's that you'll financially outperform the rest of the market by maximizing the amount of good that you do. I think if we think about business and how we value businesses, it just kind of makes sense, which is the valuation of a business should be and will eventually, I believe, be tied to the value that it's creating in society. And if all companies solve problems, won't we value those more who are solving problems that matter more to everyday people around the world? And that's really our belief, that the entrepreneurs we support are the future titans of industry, that they will be remembered as having helped define progress in our time, and that we get to play this really humble role in supporting them on their journey. So I'm going to stop sharing. And maybe we could just open it up, because I feel like I'm blabbering too much here, Todd. But I appreciate you all taking the time to listen as well.
Daniel, thank you. This is amazing. So please, folks, raise your hands. I will call on you. Mafe, you're out of the gate first.
Wow, this is amazing.
Thanks, Mafe.
Daniel, first, let me ask this question and define it for us. What is an impact investor, and what is a corporate B corporation?
A B Corp.
A B Corp.
B Corp. So we're a B Corp, actually. That's a great question. Mm-hmm. So a B Corp is an easy one because there's a clear definition. In essence, you change your bylaws of your corporation to take into account stakeholders, not just shareholders. And what that does is most corporate governance, the shareholders have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize the financial return of that company for the investors. And if you become a B Corp, the shareholders now have a fiduciary responsibility to not just maximize profits at all costs, but to take into account the stakeholders in the system. So that would mean the teams, the customers, the communities they operate, the environmental impact. And so it's a legal change and signal that you can make as a startup. So we are, we're an S Corp, but you can be a B Corp as an S Corp as well. And so any for-profit business can become a B corporation, become B certified. And then you get graded on how well you are looking at stakeholders through a big assessment, and hopefully you improve those scores over time. An impact investor is a much harder question to answer because everybody has different definitions. I actually don't use the word impact investing much because everybody defines it differently. And what we really try to think about is we call it legacy investing, which is an acknowledgement that every dollar that you put out as an investment will have a legacy. It will echo throughout time. And what is the legacy that you want those investments to have in terms of the state of the world and intergenerationally, and for your kids and for your grandkids? The other reason we talk about legacy investing is people do want to invest and have a financial legacy that ideally ensures that they can continue to take care of their family and the things that they really care about. For us, legacy investing or impact investing is when you can allocate dollars at the nexus of I would say high profit for-profit businesses that baked into the DNA of their profit model, they're solving a societal or environmental problem. It's not a nice to have feature that's like it might be a marketing strategy for a company, or it might just be a nice thing to have. But what we're really looking for are companies where we can say it's baked in the DNA of the profit model. So the more money that they make, the more positive impact they're having on the core issue that they're trying to solve. But of course, impact investors, that definition really ranges. Some people will consider it philanthropic or concessionary. We don't. Where we're focused, we actually think that the investments are outperforming market rate returns. But everybody would have a different kind of take on that, I think. I don't know if that answered your question, Mafe.
Yes, Daniel. Thank you so much for giving it a definition here. And I like the legacy investing because it makes more sense to what the conversation I had from some people. Yeah. And the reason why I'm asking is because I had designed an eco village back in 2013 when the typhoon hit the Philippines, and this idea just came out of me. And somebody buy into it and they want to donate land, and I got scared. Because I did not know what to do, and the idea was to start from the people instead of starting from the building. And I pitched it to them, and they would like to donate their land. And so it was too scary for me, but then it got reactivated when there was a war, and this particular solution can actually be applied, because it's something that is scalable and duplicatable in other countries. And so I just didn't know what to do with this project at first, but now it's active again. And seeing what you're doing in your company, I'm losing the name. I'm kind of feeling the alignment and all this, so I just didn't know where to get started. But I'd like to continue the conversation later on.
Please, you can reach out anytime. I really mean that. There's two ways to reach out. One is we do have a contact form on our website, which will ensure that you get to the right person. But you can also email me, just daniel@unreasonablegroup.com. I am about to step out of the office for like 9 days though, so I might be slow to respond, but then I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mafe. Jeremy, and then we'll go to Liz.
Daniel, thank you for your presentation and for exposing us to Unreasonable. I appreciate it, so thank you. I don't know if I'm going to take you in a different direction than you expected. Oh, yeah. I'm all about
nothing's off limits.
I'm all about that left turn. So, we live in this era where transparency and is doing well, doing good. I'm on a regular basis reading about the expectations of CEOs of established companies to make a statement on things that happen in general society. Yeah. And so, we've got all of these people that it sounds like, we're reaching out to be mentors, to be voices of, the budding entrepreneurs. I'm curious, how does Unreasonable articulate to the public, to its investors, that here's who's making sure that what we're doing, these are good things, right? Like it makes a lot of sense to see we're going to recycle this CO2 in a way that is really effective for the environment. But
great question.
Who's making sure that that is the right thing? Where's the checks and balances on what it means to do good when doing well also?
It's a great question. The answer is, if I'm candid, there aren't real checks and balances in place right now for private companies in that sense. So it's also why when we think about the fellowship, we are inviting the CEO of the company as an individual into the fellowship. And part of our interview process for that CEO is to really understand the intention around why they started it and are running that company. And if the intention is, I found a great opportunity to make a ton of money because there was a deficit in the market, we're actually not interested in working with them. If the intention instead is, I want to solve this challenge full stop, and I'm going to dedicate my life to it for this reason, typically the very powerful reason why they really care about that global issue, and then profit's just the tool to be able to do that at scale, then we're really interested. But there's no full, we don't audit like we would like to, Jeremy, to your point. I also think it's really important to do something that we're not doing right now because it's hard to do, it's expensive to do, but it's to not just track intended consequences, because I can guarantee you, like LanzaTech will report incredible data on climate change in terms of eventually pulling out gigatons of not even letting gigatons go into the atmosphere in the first place. But unintended consequences are a very important thing for everybody to be looking and examining that much more sincerely. And so I hope that it's probably going to take us a couple of years, but a couple of years from now, we have all of our entrepreneurs track their impact as most adjacent to the one, their profit model, and two, the SDG that they're trying to solve. And so that might be, access for adolescent girls to be able to go to school. So they might be tracking the number of girls and the graduation rates, right? They might be looking at challenges around healthcare and affordability. They might be looking at carbon reduction from the atmosphere. So we have them all track and report on that. What we're not having them track and report on is what is the most likely unintended consequence when this really scales that's negative, and let's also report and track on those numbers. And I think that's a really important step to be taken. I hope we play an active role in that, but it's easier said than done. Doesn't mean it's not important, and we will eventually be doing it. I don't know if I answered your question, Jeremy. I mean, the truth is that it's not being audited. So we really look at intention. Obviously, we check references. Our entrepreneurs know other entrepreneurs, our mentors know other entrepreneurs. Will quickly hear when something doesn't smell right in that sense, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah, I don't know if it was an answer the question type of question as much as it was a stimulate the conversation and the dialogue type of question. Because what also like dovetailed from it when LaRue and I spoke in our breakout, one of the things that's really hard is that you find a lot of these entrepreneurs who have a really great idea for how to change the world, but they're not business people. So they don't know how to go about making that change happen. So it's probably another topic, but I'm glad we had the conversation and that it's coming up about can't just do good because you say it's good. We need to sort of understand what all the consequences are.
And so, and we do measure and validate the good, but we don't look at the negative unintended consequences yet. It's a great question.
Jeremy, thank you. Liz, then Donna. Wow, we have a lot of questions, a lot of hands up.
I'll go faster.
So, hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for this presentation. It means a lot that you're here today. My question is, as this, minority woman, it's tough to get investor, especially when you have a social entrepreneur embedded in your company. What is the advice that you can give a person like me that is starting the business and it's a social cost first, then the profit comes later?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good example of we don't think profit is a bad thing at all, right? Clearly, but profiteering is not something that we're interested in at Unreasonable, right? Profit's a tool. Profiteering is just the pursuit of profit in and of itself. And what you're saying is you're not profiteering at all. You're impact first. Profit's the tool. It is the statistics are not in your favor. The statistics are in the favor of people who look like me and are even my age in terms of raising investment, right? But that is a very unfortunate current circumstance that to me is absurd and needs to change, and we need to play a role in changing it. Within our fellowship, we have about 40% of the CEOs we support are women. About 25% are women who would identify as women of color. That's across that community, they struggle disproportionately on financing. The best thing that I think we do for them in particular is, one, we do obviously connect to funders, but it's them connecting with one another as well, to swap data and information and stories and successes. That is typically most helpful. And so, if you wanted to connect with any of our CEOs who are women of color in the United States who have raised financing in an impact first mission, I'm very happy to connect you. That'd be the first thing I would say. And the second thing I'd say is you can also look through our website. You can see every single company. You can search, you can filter by them. You can find that CEO. And then you can also reach out to me and say, hey, I'd really like to talk to Dr. Lisa Dyson as a Black woman in the United States, just raised the largest round of investment that any Black woman has at a Series B level. And there's a lot of that in our community. And I find that mentorship's an interesting thing because it's everybody will give you advice when you ask for advice. Everybody. And that it's most valuable, though, I believe, to really listen to the advice of those who have walked the path that you're trying to walk yourself. And so that's what I would say. I would love to connect you to entrepreneurs who have been in a similar spot and failed, but then eventually succeeded in raising capital along the way. And maybe we could be supportive too in that. So we'd be very happy to talk.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciated your feedback and everything that you have given me. It's really helped. And I will check.
Follow up with me.
I've been contact. Yeah, I want to follow up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Donna, then Divya.
I hope my questions are quick so I can ask two, but I'll start with the one I'm most curious about. So I find, well, probably all do, that governments, some of them more than others, are so busy fighting against, one side, so polarized and getting things done. I wonder how you find they fit into what you're doing.
Oh, so it's a great question. When we started Unreasonable, I really wondered who would hang out with us, if that makes sense. Like, we put an intention out there in the world, and who would be attracted to it? Well, I'm based in Boulder. I personally I file independent, but I'm very liberal tendencies, I would say. It was the first investment fund that we raised. The very first anchor in that fund was actually a Fox News anchor, which shocked me. And what he was telling me, he's more libertarian than anything, but what he said is, he was like, hang on, you're telling me we can use private sector dollars, not taxpayer dollars, to solve problems that typically the government is really trying to solve on its own? Why wouldn't I support that? And then, of course, we're working with far left to Democrat to liberal to like everything in between, independent and all over the spectrum. Because what we found almost by accident is that when we galvanize people around saying, hey, we can support these companies that are solving problems we all care about, in essence, it feels more like a win-win-win. It speaks to all sides of that equation. We didn't have as many relationships in the Trump White House, but we were still able to work with the U.S. government in different ways. And one of our larger partners now is the U.S. State Department, and we have kind of a congressionally approved partnership, and it's bipartisan funding towards public-private partnerships that will support entrepreneurs around solving problems related to the SDGs internationally. And so I think it's really important to work with policy. I think that business is far too effective at governing our policies to date in a lot of ways. And so if we can play a role in kind of bringing a different type of business to policymakers, I think it's really important. I'll stop talking, Donna. You had a second question, I think.
I love that. I love that you're making things happen there. And the second question is, so I'm a lawyer, and I want to see how do the lawyers fit into what you're doing at Unreasonable?
Oh, lawyers are so important. What entrepreneur doesn't need a good lawyer?
And I'm just wondering because, what kinds of lawyers? Like, is it mostly like intellectual property and that type of thing, or?
Oh, it could be everything. It could be intellectual property. It could be M&A. It could be contract law. It could be HR. I mean, it goes every side of that spectrum. We have a lot of lawyers actually in our mentor community. We even work with some law firms where we'll connect our entrepreneurs into those firms, and those firms kind of show up in a unique way for the companies in the fellowship. I am really important.
And what about like in the context of different, countries and all that? Do you find it sort of like the same difference that, or do you find in some areas that?
Yeah, of course we need experts in with the right track record in whatever jurisdiction the companies are in. But we do, and it's why our mentor community, it's why our entrepreneur community of investors, it is really global. And also, if we don't have the right attorney in the community directly, typically somebody will know who's a great attorney who can help solve that problem. And so the CEOs we support are kind of hopefully 2 degrees of separation from whoever they need to be if they're not 1 degree in the community. But yes, it varies a lot between markets, of course. Quite a bit, but we have companies in most all markets.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking, and thank you for the work you do. We need good lawyers.
Thanks, Donna. Divya, and then Yvonne.
Thank you. Hey, Daniel. Thank you. That was very inspiring. So, quick question. So, one of the statistics that you pointed out at the start of your talk was 50% of startups tend to fail. Or that's kind of a number that's, everyone mentions, especially in the VC/PE space, right?
Yeah.
So question, or would love your thoughts on why do you think that is, right? Because when you think of it, it's not just something that's capital, right? Some of these startups are well-funded. they're in a good ecosystem, right? They have the network, they're supported, right? But what is that missing ingredient, and why should it be 50%? Because if you have, like you're saying, there's plenty of capital, you building a network of good mentors. Granted, you as Unreasonable as a group are coming in and supporting, the startups at a later stage growth. There is a certain, they've shown growth and progress. But when you're starting to select some of these seed and pre-seed companies too, like what do you think is that missing ingredient that drives and kind of keeps them going, but also that as capital providers are in different ways, right? Be it resources or just money or whatever it is. What is it that we need to look for?
Well, so Divya, the statistic in the US is actually 90%. 90% have filed a company and then close it within 5 years in the United States, which is pretty shocking. So it's 10% success in that sense for startups. At least that's the data that we've seen. Why do they fail? I think oftentimes they fail because it is so hard. Like it is really, really hard. There's no getting around it. And I also, though, would be interested to know, out of those companies that fail, how many, if the entrepreneur then tries a new company, what's the percentage of failure or success versus a third company? What's the percentage of failure or success? Because failure is kind of an interesting thing, right? When we look at it in and of the entity itself, that may start a company, that company may get closed down. I've certainly closed down companies, and so that would be a failure. But the way, if you continue on that path and you learn from those failures, your odds of success are probably much, much higher over a long term. And the failures aren't failures, they're just stepping stones along the way. So why do companies fail? Often, like if it is the first company for an entrepreneur, I think it's probably like 95% failure rate would be more my guess, because there are so many unknown unknowns, and it's really hard. And yes, part of it is cash flow. Absolutely, part of it is market fit and timing. Part of it is ability to raise investment or not. Obviously, not all companies raise investment. Not all companies should. Unreasonable as a company, we've never raised investment into the business itself. Part of it is really around the team that you can attract as a startup, which is probably the most important factor, honestly, at the stage of a startup. You learn all those lessons along the way. I think like entrepreneurship is like riding a bike. You can't read about it and then just do it. You can't talk to people about it and then just do it. You get on the bike and then fall over. And so maybe that's the first failed startup. But then the question is, do you get back on the bike and keep pedaling, right? And so I'd be really interested on what the success failure rate is of kind of serial entrepreneurs trying multiple companies. But I would say team is the most common thing that it comes down to, honestly, at the startup stages. Team dynamics, the ability to attract the right team, and it's really hard because you don't have any money. The dynamics between co-founders can also be amazing. It can also be really tough. I've certainly experienced both of those. I am in my very short tenure as an entrepreneur. I think that would be it. The other thing that seems to happen, and this is not advice, by the way, this is just perspective and observations, but I do think a lot of entrepreneurs also get really excited about things like the business plan and business cards and the brand and the URL, and that the real thing to get excited about is really trying to, as quickly as you can, speed up your learning cycles towards solving the problem that you really care about. And so it's easy to get distracted by those more shiny things because they're also recognized by people around us and in the media, and we kind of see that everywhere. But those who are really heads down on just trying to solve the problem and trying to gain empathy as much as possible for the customer, the user, I think they're much more likely to succeed instead of spending too much time on planning. Right? Like the best form of thinking is doing. One of our mentors, Tom Chi, says that he was an inventor behind Google Glass and the self-driving car. So we can think ourselves into insanity, but the best thing to do is actually just prototype and learn. Prototype, fail, learn, iterate. Prototype, learn, fail, iterate. And so that would be some thoughts. We don't actually work with startups anymore as an organization. We started there. part of the reason we transitioned to later stage companies was we saw that there was a huge shortage of support for later stage companies to have an ecosystem, and it's still really hard. So at any stage of business, it's still really hard. So we wanted to show up in that gap. The other thing for us was a feeling that impatience is a virtue when it comes to trying to put a dent on these global issues. And yes, it's really important to do the work with startups, but there were so many organizations helping it there, and that we figured, well, what if we could scale what works faster? We might see some change faster. So that was some of the thinking, but it's hard, Divya, that's all.
Thank you, that was very helpful, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks
Divya. Yvonne, and then we'll go to Golden.
Great. Hi, Daniel, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Question related to what Jeremy had asked. Have you guys thought of maybe creating the standard for measurement? So, like the legacy index, right? Everybody talks about impact, everybody talks about ESG, nobody knows what it means, and everybody's frustrated by it. Maybe that idea to use your collective as a way to create a measurement index that would set the standard for the world.
I love that. Yes, we have absolutely thought about it, but part of it for us is prioritizing and just sequencing and so on. But and that's why I say in 2 years, we've absolutely thought about it, though. It will be a hard thing to get right, but that is not the reason not to do it. And this gets back to that point. I'm very excited for us to experiment in that direction and to kind of publish and share what we learn until we really figure it out. And what I'm referring to is tracking those negative consequences, because you're right. Part of that legacy is not just the positive ramifications of the work or the product, but also the negative, right? And I think, especially with consumer businesses, I am a friend who's an amazing entrepreneur. He said this really well. It's so obvious. He said, look, everything that has ever been produced and sold was made from the earth and will go back into the earth in one way or another. And it's so easy to sell a product and feel good about it because it's made out of a recycled material, whatever that is. But what happens to it at the end of its life cycle? Where does it really end up, and at what volume, right? So we thought about it. I think we will play a role there in a couple of years.
Well, that would be my ask, to not wait a couple of years and to maybe look to see if you have any data that you could back test into it, because it is you can't get. I think. It's a rabbit hole where the focus of people, they get interested in it and then they lose interest in it because they can't measure it. So it becomes critical to, the basically not enforcement, but actually people really getting on the bandwagon and carrying it forward. And just one other question on this. Some of the companies that you introduced through your presentation seem to be dealing with issues that, looking at the world trends, and everybody's talking about famine and lack of water. Is there a way that those specific solutions, the hydroponic farm, could be blitz scaled? And are you guys thinking about how to answer those solutions? Because all we keep hearing about is people are going to go hungry in the next year. And it's very frustrating that, okay, we know there's a problem, let's try to fix it.
Yeah. So that's in essence our job as a community, is to rapidly accelerate their ability to scale their impact. And actually, you said blitz scaling, because Chris Ye, the author of Blitz Scaling, is one of our mentors and a really good friend, and he helps a lot of walk through the methodology of that, a lot of our companies. So yes, and to scale to the size of the problem is a massive ask for any singular company. And so it's also why we have a portfolio approach. We don't think there's any panacea solution for anything. And even if you're looking at hunger, if you just attack hunger head on, or if you just attack it with one type of solution, we fail from the immediate start of that. It can never really succeed. And because at the end of the day, healthcare, poverty, gender dynamics, energy access, food access, water, it's all interconnected. Peace, stability, geopolitical seeds, like it's all interconnected in that system. And so our hope is that we can kind of collectively scale up the efforts, blitz scale as rapidly as possible without breaking the solutions, the companies that we're supporting. But to your point, right, impatience and patience are both virtues. And I think that it's the duality of it needing to hold them both at the same time that will lead to, I think, where we want to be, hopefully, in the midterm. But yeah, I feel your urgency. I completely agree. Drives me crazy. It's like, especially when solutions are so obvious, so compelling, you have 400 times the efficiency and it's cost effective and profitable. It's like, how can we not scale this faster? But there are physics, of course, tied to scaling infrastructure versus something that is purely virtual. And not much of what we do is purely virtual. Some is. So we work with like Classcraft is a good example. Started working with them. They were reaching 100,000 students. They're now reaching about 16 million students. And they could scale much faster because it's a virtual platform. But infrastructure is just a hard thing to scale as quickly as we want to.
Thank you. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your questions. I love them.
Thanks, Yvonne. And now we go to Golden. And just so everyone remembers this, Golden will be joining us on June 8th as our presenter. So Golden, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Todd. This is incredible. Daniel, the first thing I want to say before I even share my question is you are the Jedi of social entrepreneurship.
No, way too kind, man.
You really
way
are,
too
man. I've been involved in social entrepreneurship for over 15 years. And actually, I remember the creation of B corporations when the three friends came together to bring it to life. And I thought it was game changing. And so my question to you would be, so when you get involved in social entrepreneurship, at least in my experience, we kind of grapple with the thought of, okay, should we become a nonprofit? Should we become a for-profit?
Yeah.
So in your portfolio of the several hundred entrepreneurs you work with now, can you give us an example of maybe a founder who was kind of grappling whether they should go the nonprofit route or the for-profit route?
Yes, there are a couple. Now, we typically select for-profit companies, but one example may actually even be myself. So Unreasonable started as Unreasonable Institute, which was a 501c3 nonprofit. Then as we decided to move later stage in the companies that we were supporting, I felt like we really needed to practice what we preach. And for our model, it felt like it was more integrous to move it into a for-profit model, but we actually were a nonprofit and then became a for-profit. So it's a great example, but a good example would be Ubongo. This is it's a children's education platform on the African continent. It's in essence like Sesame Street, but for made by Africans in Africa and appropriate for the population and the continent. And they started as a for-profit. They then went into kind of a hybrid mix. And now, by and large, they're a profitable nonprofit. And that was to really protect the sanctity of the work, I would say, because there could have been a situation where, ideally, the more money the company makes, the more impact it has. But in something like that, there was a theoretical situation where they could make more money by selling a different type of ads or whatever that might be that could pull them away from their mission. And so they really protected it with nonprofit status. So that's a good example. It's UBONGO, Ubongo. And there's a couple more a couple of our companies will have hybrid models where they may actually be a nonprofit that they operate as a for-profit, but it's owned by a foundation or a nonprofit umbrella company. As well. And then they can still raise investment dollars into the for-profit company. And if they have an exit event, they can give returns back to those investors. But then the rest of that would go into the nonprofit, which was like a parent company. But almost, I would say 97% probably of our companies are for-profit companies where there's just alignment with the impact and the profit model really clearly.
Okay, amazing. And just to follow up on that, by the way, thank you so much. That was incredible. So when I visited your website, I saw it was, first of all, oh my God, it's just an amazing, well-built site. But I was looking for the ways that Unreasonable kind of does community impact, right? So I know that you guys definitely focus on supporting your founders and supporting your investors and the cities and communities you're in, but like, what are some of the causes that Unreasonable really cares about? Like what's deep to the heart of Unreasonable in terms of supporting initiatives in the communities you guys are in?
I mean, it is broad. in that sense, because we look across healthcare, education and learning, energy and the environment, biodiversity, and then a category we'd call new frontiers, which is largely around poverty solutions that combat different angles of poverty. And so we do look across it. I'd say if you asked me personally, what's near and dear to my heart, and in the US around social justice, a big part of that would be our prison system. That's a great example of something that should not be privatized. It's a really, the incentives are just so skewed in the wrong direction. I do not think there is the system itself. Well, maybe the system's working how it was intended, but how we would like for it to work, it's broken. And so a great company that we support there, Edovo, they're looking at prison education. Their platform, they work with about 300,000 inmates right now. They decrease recidivism rates by 88%. And those who are able to get onto that platform. And it's a learning, it's a vocational learning, training, and emotional, and also part of its emotional intelligence and kind of getting together as a community, as inmates in prison systems. But I would say that is, and there's a number of examples of solutions kind of in that space, but it is a systems problem too. But that one is something that personally, I just think that the statistics are insane. You know, we have higher per capita prison population than any country in the world, and we point fingers at China and Russia and other places. Ours is much worse, and the racial statistics on it are just egregious, and it clearly doesn't work, right, in terms of recidivism. So that would be one. But we do look, we kind of look at it all, and that is, once again, our approach is there is no panacea solution. All these systems are interrelated, interconnected. And so we need a myriad or a community of solutions to even start moving the needle in a way that lasts on really any of them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sensei. You are amazing.
You're way too kind. Way too kind.
Thanks, Golden. So real quick, I just want to do a time check. Daniel, how are you doing on time?
I have 10 minutes.
You got, okay, 10 minutes. And I know Kelly's got a question at the end. So George, Satya, Swapnil, then Kelly, and I have got one quick question for you.
I promise I'll be faster.
Okay, so George,
and I have a question.
Oh,
and I have a question as well.
Also. All right.
Yeah.
George, quickly, you're up.
Daniel,
lightning round.
Yeah, you mentioned Boulder, Colorado. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
In Golden, Colorado is where I became an engineer.
Nice. School of Mines.
Yeah. So you might guess that I'm from energy.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something different.
Yeah.
What do you think about the digital currency? Does it have potential to give us resources to do the impossible things possible? Because things that you mentioned, like try to make a living while we clean up the mess we're making on Earth, it requires a lot, not billions, probably trillions. Do you think that the digital evolution can help us now?
Yes, I think it could certainly help. But the way I look at I think digital currency, and I'm not an expert, I think it's inevitable, because if we just think about it from a logic perspective, it's just a smarter, more secure, more liquid system that needs less intermediaries. So I think at some point it is absolutely inevitable, but I hesitate to look at any technology, and that could include solar or anything, as like the solution, right? Because I think the analogy I really love is that technology, a hammer is a technology, right? A simple hammer. And a hammer can be used to build a house or destroy a home. What really matters is the consciousness of the person wielding that tool. And so as technology is rapidly accelerating in its power and abilities, digital currency is a great example. If we have the same kind of posture and approach to it as we always had, it's just going to lead to a greater wealth gap. Honestly, it's going to lead to a much greater divide. And we're seeing that, right? But if we can approach that with a different consciousness and looking at stakeholders instead of just shareholders, then I think it has huge potential. Because I think technology is ambivalent. It's agnostic. Yes, digital currency will be a really important part of our future. Yes, it will and is being used in some ways for a lot of good. And it could also be used for bad, like all of these technologies. So I hope that it's one that is stewarded in a way that leads to a much better world, because it is capable of doing that.
So what you're thinking is now there's an opportunity to make some good out of that before
Absolutely.
it becomes a commodity and then takes its own path.
Takes its own path. Yeah. And it comes down once again to the intentionality, which is why we also look at intentionality of the CEOs that we work with. But there are brilliant minds in that space and really good hearts. And so how do we just align it? So yeah, it's a great question.
Thanks, George. Satya, and then Swapnil.
Hi, Daniel. Going back in time to when Unreasonable had 0 company, 0 customer, 0 investors, 0 mentors.
Fun, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What enabled you to go from that to a few customers, few investors, few mentors, right? And what were some of the mistakes that you made?
Yeah, hubris and foolhardiness. It's like honestly what enabled it. No, so I actually didn't get. I was an entrepreneur in university and started 3 startups. None of them hit any level of scale that would be really noteworthy. Not at the level that our fellows are certainly at in terms of impact, but I felt really lonely and in between these 2 worlds of the nonprofit world and for-profit world, because I wanted to solve problems typically done in the nonprofit world, but for-profit companies. And so the genesis of Unreasonable was actually not even supposed to be a company. It was just a community. I felt like a misfit and wanted to seek refuge amongst fellow misfit entrepreneurs. These other individuals who were naive, maybe enough to believe they could put a dent on the world's hardest problems, but hell-bent and determined in a way that they would never fall. They would never stop until they did. And that community, and this was back in 2000 and let me get it right, 8. At that point in time, that community didn't exist. If it had, I would have applied to get into it, but because it didn't, some friends and I just kind of built it. I didn't take a salary for the first 4 years. It was hard. Basically nobody did. At one point in time, I remember we ran the very first Unreasonable Institute 10-week program in Boulder. And at one point in time, there were $27 in our bank account. Like it was hard, but we just did it. We didn't have permission to do it. We just felt like it needed to be done. And for us, right? And in my case, for me as an entrepreneur, I just wanted that community. It wasn't until a couple of years into this experiment, right, that became Unreasonable, where I realized, oh my gosh, if what I really care about is impact, I can have so much more impact by supporting the entrepreneurs on the front lines who already have solutions than trying to come up with new ones of my own. And I became addicted and obsessed with what we were trying to do at Unreasonable. But it was a long slog. 8 years into it, there were still weeks where I didn't know how to make payroll. That's why it's so hard, like getting back to how hard the journey is. But I loved it because my heart was so in it, because I cared so much about the meaningful side of the work. And I think that's all the other reason why companies probably often fail so much is like to get through all of the challenges and hurdles and failures and stress that comes with it. I think you have to really believe in the importance of it. And I think a lot of companies get started because it's like, oh, it's a nice idea. And I don't think that oftentimes will pull a founder through the difficulties. I have way more failure. I have like a million failure stories, but we don't have enough time.
Thanks.
Then Susan.
Thanks, Daniel. I think it's been kind of great listening to you. And also, I saw on your earlier slide, I recognize the face, Beth Comstock. So I come from...
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
I come from the energy background, power generation background. And yes, some of the things that we're discussing right now, decarbonization, those are tough problems, right? They take many years to solve. I was just, while you're talking, I was just looking at my bookshelf, and I have this book that I bought in hydrogen economy 20 years ago. And now suddenly it's a talk of the town again, right? 20 years later. So these things take a lot of time to solve. So I was trying to reconcile something that you said, amazing. You said when you welcome the CEO as your, as part of the fellowship, you support them for life. I feel like, how do you reconcile that with the whole portfolio approach? Because you don't know which solution is actually going to make an impact, right? I understand you take these $26 million companies, but for the kind of problem you're talking about, $1 trillion problems,
who's going to
$26 million is still one of the shots that we're taking.
Very small.
How do you reconcile supporting for life and then a portfolio approach where you need to try different solutions?
Yeah, we support them as an individual for life, right? So long as there's an asterisk if they go to their next business, whatever it is, they're dedicating their work towards solving a problem that really matters in the world. If their next company is, it could be a fun company, but it's, selling comics or something like that, that's great. But then we wouldn't still support in the same way that we do. But we support the CEO and we induct them based on the company that they're running, right? And the integrity of that business and the potential scale of it. But we're really looking also at the character of that founder and CEO. Because when we say lifelong support, that means it's clearly not just going to be that company. Right? At some point in time, they may sell it, they may IPO it, they may realize, actually, I'm a great engineer, not a great CEO, whatever that might be, and then go on to that next thing. And we still try to support them through that next endeavor. Did I answer your question? Kind of?
Yes. I think you just explained the aspects. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Swapnil. Susan.
All right. So this was just incredible, Daniel. So I actually have two questions, one from me and one jointly from me and Todd.
Yeah, nice.
So my question is, many of the people in this call today are trying to solve these intractable problems where most of us are also very early stage startups.
Yeah.
And so in addition to just really believing in what we're doing, because that's going to keep us going, what's the one other pearl of wisdom you want to tell us as we are on this journey? That's the first question.
I actually think it's kind of what you're doing. And I would say, fortify yourselves with each other. It is so easy to feel like you're doing everything backwards and maybe you're crazy and all your friends and your spouses and your parents and your kids think you're nuts and it will never work. And I think it's so important to have a community that can empathize with you and support each other when it gets really hard. And that would be the second part is in order to do that well, and it feels like you all do this, but have that safe space where you can be really vulnerable and not judged. That is probably the biggest gift we give the CEOs in the Unreasonable Fellowship. Is a very safe space to really show up. And oftentimes, and it's in some ways, it's unfortunate in some ways. We know more about them and what's going on than maybe their spouses do, because they feel so estranged from talking to other people who won't necessarily kind of get whatever that is. So that it's what you all are doing. But I would really lean into being vulnerable with each other as well and creating that space, because that's what will get you through it. Will be, I think, community is probably the most valuable asset.
Very, very, very cool. Thank you. And so here's the second question from Todd and me. You have given us so much in just this very short period of time. What can this community do for you?
Oh, well, my first answer was like, do what you're doing. I mean, if you have a startup and it matters, like, keep at it, and raise your hand and ask for help and support one another. That'd be the first biggest thing, because like being on the front lines as an entrepreneur is extremely hard. Right? Like my job's kind of meta in a way. Like, yes, we are ourselves a startup, but we're supporting the courageous work of the startups on the front lines. And I feel less of that in our own work. We have kind of privileged work. So that would be part of it. I would say if anybody here is an angel investor themselves, we are continually building out this community called the Unreasonable Collective. And if you're interested at all, just reasonablecollective.com is really easy. And there's a wait list, but if you just mentioned that it was through this conversation, then we'd put you all at the top of the wait list. But that's a great way to get involved as an investor. I would say, the best thing you can probably do is raise your hand for help, honestly, because the world needs more solutions that can change the status quo for the better. So if that's what y'all are working on, like Liz and I in our breakout learned what Liz is trying to do. It's like, do everything you can to succeed. That would be the biggest favor you could do for me. But thanks for asking, Susan. I appreciate it. And Todd.
Yeah.
That's from, thank you. What can we do to help you? Susan, thanks. Yeah. Kelly.
Daniel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You taking your time to spend this night with us. I don't have a question. I just really have a comment to make. I was fortunate enough to be in New York with you at the Duchess, where we with Beth Comstock and with Tomchi and with, all these amazing people.
A lot of those folks. Yeah.
Yeah. And, one of the things I walked away with at the end of this thing was, that probably for the first time in my existence as an entrepreneur, I was in the room with some true entrepreneurs. And people who for some reason decided that they needed to change the world, and they were doing it.
Yeah.
And it was such an inspirational, week long. I had to thank God you didn't make me sleep in one of the yurts.
That's where I slept.
Yeah, that's where you slept, in the yurt, but I was in the barn. But what an inspiration that we all try to do our best, right? We all try to, we have a collection of entrepreneurs here who are thinking about how do they change the world. And a lot of times we don't see very far down that road. We don't think we can do it. And so I will say this, that your story, that you did what you did, and your impact of truly impacting millions of people around the planet is remarkable. And it's also a testament to how, any one of us can do this.
Yeah, exactly. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Well, I don't want to say it that way, Daniel.
I know what you mean, Kelly.
There you go. But I will also say this, that we all need heroes, right? We all need people we look up to. We all need people, I'm a mentor in Unreasonable, but I also need mentors too. And I will say Daniel is one of my true heroes. For what he's done. So thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for being a part of this group. And this group means a lot to me. And so that you come here really is very important to me. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. And I just want to reiterate, Kelly, thank you both. Thank you both.
Yes, you all are amazing. I unfortunately do have to jump, but Kelly, that means the world to me. You are someone who I also look up to in a very sincere way, and to this whole community. Clearly you're having fun doing hard work and coming together, and that also matters too. Celebrate the wins, and even the failures. Sometimes you just have to laugh at it. There's like no way to get through it otherwise, but it's a fantastic community. So thank you all for having me, and hopefully our paths will cross again. I would love that.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Daniel.
No, thanks.
Before we end the recording, just a couple of announcements. Next week, Susan and Jeremy will be giving a product market fit workshop. June 1st is the monthly social, so we will not be meeting startups. June 8th, Golden Martinez, who's here on the call, or he was. I don't know if he's still here.
He's still there.
Good.
I'm still here, Todd. Thank you.
June 8th, we've got you coming. I'm looking forward to that, to talk about getfocused.org. And June 15th, Mark Pillar from Backendless will be coming. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.